Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us this lovely Monday evening. So our plan for today, we have some staff members, myself and another person. We have a member of the faculty, and we have a few students that were able to join us for tonight. So our plan is to just do kind of quick introductions of ourselves, and then each kind of talk about our environmental sustainability story at Hampshire, like where we fit in that kind of sustainability universe here. And then the rest of the time we're here for questions. So it depends a little bit on how wordy we are and how many questions you guys have. So I'll be checking the chat as we go. So if you have a question, something comes up, put it in there, and then I'll know a little bit like how much time we need to make sure we have. So again, I'm Sarah Draper. I'm the director of the RW Kern Center at Hampshire College, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit later. Also here with us today, we have Claire Shillington. Claire works with me at the RW Kern Center as well. We have Professor Chris Sanfrani, who, among other things, teaches hydrology at Hampshire. And then three students, Ethan, I'm pointing where they are on my screen, not in real life. Ethan, Meredith, and Emily, you're here as well, right? There you are. Okay, you nodded and I could see you. And so actually, let's start. Mare, actually, do you want to just start sharing what's your Hampshire sustainability story?
Yeah, I'll share my Hampshire sustainability story. So mine's a little more interesting, I guess. I'm a transfer student, not more interesting, that's harsh. But I'm a transfer student, so I have a different perspective coming into Hampshire. I think transferring to Hampshire is definitely the best move I've ever made in terms of my career. I was at University of Edinburgh, which is in Scotland, and I was studying literature. And I transferred, I came here, and just because it interests me, I signed up for Tim Zimmerman's Oceans of Change class. And that was kind of when I was reawakened to this idea of how passionate I was about climate change as an issue. And then from there, I kind of was taking more classes around sustainability. I took a class with Chris, 2 classes with Chris actually. And then I ended up applying to be an intern at the RW Kern Center, which is the most amazing building that I've ever known about. Well, I guess Sarah will probably talk more about it, but I'll talk? Okay, well, it's called a living building because it's a green building. It catches its own water, cleans it, uses it. We have solar array on the roof. Like every aspect of the building is just so thoroughly thought out with insulation, with recycled materials. And I work mainly doing publicity and outreach. One of the things that I did this year was I put on an art show called The Illusion of a Way, where we did art all themed around trash and waste. And there were local artists, there were student artists, and it was just a really great kind of coming together of the community. And the other thing I study, of course, from my literature background is creative writing. And I am, approaching my last year at Hampshire. So next year is my last year. And as you guys know, with researching Hampshire, that's when you do your Division 3 project, which is like your big capstone project. And I finally settled into the idea that I'm really excited about, which is I will be putting together a collection of poems about climate change because of this question that has always been bouncing around in my brain of, why don't people get how serious this is? So I've kind of been able to combine my 2 interests in sustainability and sort of learning on that side of stuff and the arts and creativity. And I'm really hyped for my Div 3. I'm so excited, but I'll let Ethan go, I guess, because he's finished his Div 3.
Yeah, that was great, Mare. So I just graduated 2 days ago, which is wild. Had a Zoom graduation. But my journey through sustainability at Hampshire was definitely kind of all over the place from when I started. I started at Hampshire and I wanted to, I started off studying like economics, and my tutorial was like a history of the Syrian refugee crisis through like an economic lens. And it was interesting and like definitely had a lot of aspects of it's sort of like a lot of stuff to do with like oil distribution in the Middle East and like I don't know, sort of all over the place. But that first semester, I also took a modeling systems course, which focused on the Kern Center and like some of the renewable energy systems, like water systems there. Started studying that. Realized I was really into the microbiology of what was going on in the water filters, and then sort of like pivoted to studying microbiology and math at Hampshire in my second year. And ended up, I got a certification in green building technology through applying some of that, what I learned in that course to an independent study. And then I just recently completed my Div 3 project, which was sort of a threefold project. A portion of it was I was creating sculptures out of styrofoam that were being degraded by the gut bacteria of mealworms. And the gut bacteria of mealworms is actually able to break down styrofoam into sort of like this like compostable waste that you can use to grow different things in. And basically it's like a potential method for like composting styrofoam. So I was sort of like working on the some of like a practical application of that to make art, which I didn't get to present, but it was an interesting topic that I came into from taking a class called environmental microbiology my second year. And I read like an offhand paper, gave a presentation on it in the class, and then proceeded to forget about it for a year until my Div 3 came around. And I was like, that was actually a really interesting sort of like method that people were doing. And I decided I wanted to explore it, and definitely would never have been able to do a senior project like that anywhere except for Hampshire. So very unique.
Thanks, Ethan. Emily, do you want to share a little bit of what you've been working on and how you kind of got into, what's your environmental sustainability connection at Hampshire?
So I knew I wanted to study sustainability before I went to I took an environmental science class my senior year of high school, and that's when it clicked. So I went to Hampshire knowing I wanted it, but it took me in several different directions. I started out thinking I wanted to build sustainable cities, and then my tutorial was microbes and gray water treatment with Jason Torr, and it was about the Kern Center gray water treatment system. And then I thought I wanted to do microbiology, so I took a microbiology class, and then it was really interesting, but I didn't want to dedicate my life to it, so I took renewable energy classes at a class called Sustainable Hampshire with Steve Roof, I think it was. And I took a sustainability class with Chris, and I've done independent studies about sustainability, and I've landed on environmental science and public health in combination to fight climate change and the health impacts that come with it. So it's been a very twisty road.
Awesome. I want to hear more about that. But Claire, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Claire. I work at Hampshire right now with Sarah at the RW Kern Center, but I actually graduated from Hampshire last year, so I sort of still have that student perspective. And so that's probably what I'll talk about most, except we keep talking about this building, the Kern Center, and I feel like we need to address that. which I will maybe try to do. But I will start with sort of my story. I came to Hampshire having no idea what I wanted to study. And I landed at Hampshire, and I landed in some of the classes that the other students were talking about, which centered around this building, the R.W. Kern Center. And at the time it was being built. So it was a construction site. And I had heard about it a little bit before I came to campus, but it wasn't anything that was super on my radar. But I landed in this, first year seminar tutorial class working with Chris and some other professors. And it was centered around this building and like, what is this new building, this new environmentally sustainable green building, and what are some of the things going on in it? So we took this, Hampshire systems thinking perspective, and we just asked a ton of questions about this brand new building on campus. And like Meredith said, the R.W. Kern Center is a living building, and basically it's a green building. So there are a lot of different ways we can look at that. But basically it's sustainable in like every sense of the word. We talk about sort of the water and the energy, which are the more like traditionally sustainable aspects that you might think about in a building, or materials. So like Mare said, we have recycled materials. But the big question that goes into it is what makes a building good? And a little bit of the background in how that got to Hampshire was one of our previous presidents, Jonathan Lash, had a really big interest in sustainability. And he sort of brought this idea of we needed a new admissions building on campus, and we were like, let's make the greenest building that we can. And so that's sort of the context for how we have this building at Hampshire that everybody keeps talking about. But yeah, so I landed in this class at Hampshire where this building was being built. It was a construction site, and we were like touring it. We were asking all of these questions. It was supposed to have this really sustainable water system and energy system. And our job was basically to figure out like what that all meant and how that was going to work. And so that sort of launched me into my sustainability career at Hampshire. After that semester, I worked with Chris basically every other semester at Hampshire. And like Sarah said, she teaches hydrology and water resources. And so that's what I worked on with her for the rest of my time at Hampshire. And there were a lot of different ways I did that. I took courses, I did independent studies. I ended up doing summer internships and work study jobs and stuff like that, which is how I met Sarah and started working at the R.W. Kern Center. And after I graduated, I ended up in a more permanent role. And so now I work in the building, and like Sarah, we do a little bit of everything, a little bit of building management and watering plants. But I focus a little bit I focus more on campus and sort of working with students with their sustainability interests. So we offer grants to students, and we work with interns, like Mare said. So working with them on a daily, weekly basis. Yeah, that's my brief, rambly introduction.
Thanks. Chris?
Hi, everyone. So glad to see so many of you here this evening. I'm Chris. I am faculty in the School of Natural Sciences, and I teach hydrology and environmental science. And it's really great to hear all of these students who have been in my classes or I've worked with, and for you to hear their stories, because I think that's one of the most exciting things about working here is I have my research interests and the things that I'm trained in. My background's in civil and environmental engineering, and I do a lot of projects that way. But it's really the most fun for me working with students who have so many different interests. So you heard from Mare, who's interested in creative writing and poetry, and worked with Ethan on sculptures this year, which is amazing. And Claire was really interested in the gray water systems, and Emily is looking at a new system of the solid waste and out of the Kern Center. And so people find really unique ways to bring interests together. And I think that's something that's really fun for the students to do, but also really fun for us as faculty to be able to see how different people combine different fields and ask these new questions that we probably would have never thought to ask. And so that's really a fun thing for me to do. As been mentioned, I teach classes in water resources and climate change. And this past fall, I taught a class that both Emily and Mare were in about environmental sustainability. And that was really to look at all different kinds of sustainability on campus and use our campus as a living lab. So many of the things we do at Hampshire are centered around sustainability and how can we think about the resources we use and do that in a better way. So in this class, we went and toured the solar field and talked with folks about the solar generation on campus. We went to the farm and we talked with our farmer, Nancy Hansen, about farm production on the campus and how do we think about that? How do we supply food? How much energy does the farm use? Where does the food come from? And then we also went to the Kern Center and talked about water recycling and how do you collect your own water, treat your water, where does it go? And the students were able to do all different kinds of projects on these topics. So for example, one of the group projects, the students worked collaboratively to develop an energy budget for the farm. So they had to talk to Nancy, they had to look at the buildings, they had to think about how much power is used and where, and how much solar energy do we produce. And then at the end, students also did their own projects and people had a wide variety. We had folks that created videos about sustainability. We had, Mare did a podcast, I think, if I'm remembering, and, you know, different posters and someone did an art installation and all these different ways to think about sustainability, which I think is really, really interesting. It's not just about science or just about politics or just about economics. It's all of these different things and people bring their own interests to it, both in their own projects, but also within classes. You can do that often within classes. So that's my sustainability story at Hampshire. And it's been really fun and it changes every year. Every year I get to work with new students. And so I'm excited to hear what your questions are and happy to answer any of them.
We will do that in 1 second. I just realized I didn't say anything about me except for my name. So hi, I'm still Sarah. And as Bernadette and other people were saying, I'm the director of the R.W. Kern Center, which is, contrary to popular belief, like actually just a building, but it is super cool. And there's a lot of sustainability themes and elements that we kind of look at through the building. So I'm kind of one node of this sustainability community that we have on campus. Chris mentioned the solar fields. So, you know, we do have these 2 huge solar arrays on campus, and there's a few professors and members of, you know, the facilities department that operate and run and do research and kind of work to improve that system, and students have worked with that. Chris also mentioned the farm. We have the campus farm. That's kind of this other more like sustainable food production node here at Hampshire. And the cool part for me is seeing like all of these different interactions between these different kind of sustainability themes at Hampshire. I actually came to Hampshire from an architecture firm. So the firm that designed the aforementioned R.W. Kern Center, I used to work for them. And when the building opened, we got the chance to kind of have this position to make sure that people could continue to learn from the building. And it wasn't just, hey, look, we made something new and shiny. It was really important for Hampshire to say, okay, so how do we use this as part of our educational model? And how do we make this educational for the community in general, or for other people who build buildings, architects, builders, a lot of other colleges who are building a new building every 30 seconds, it seems to me sometimes. And how do we make sure that those are continuing to have a positive impact on the environment? So that's what I kind of do, is try to figure out, how do we make this building that has a positive impact on the environment? How do we continue to grow the influence of that space? So I have questions for people if you don't have questions for people, but I would prefer to answer your questions. So if anyone has something that comes up, you can either wave and unmute and just shout it out, or you can feel free to put it in the chat. I believe you can also put it in the chat anonymously, which is a feature that I love about Zoom that you can't do in real life. So I guess one question for everyone, and feel free to just jump in, guys, is how is sustainability or environmental sustainability, whether like the study of or the culture around, how is it different at Hampshire, to the extent that you have experience of talking with other students or working at other places? Like, is it different?
Can I just hop in? Or
Just hop in
yeah.
there.
Well, one thing I was actually just thinking about this when I was doing my like little introduction was like, how do I talk about this? Because I am so passionate about this school and our education model, and I really think it's made such a difference in how I perceive the world. But classic part of the Hampshire education is intersectionality. So whatever you're looking at, you're also looking at class, you're also looking at race. Like, we're not just creating solutions that are going to keep like white rich people safe from climate change. We have to look at how everything can be, sorry, I know, but I mean, honestly, we have to look at how everything can be accessible and how everything can be applicable in different aspects of society. And that's something that I don't know if it's emphasized at other colleges. Like, I talk to my friends who study sustainability. I have a friend who goes to Santa Clara, and she has been talking to me about her degree in sustainability. And I always kind of bring up some counterpoints that she hasn't even thought of. And that's something that I think is just a big benefit of the Hampshire education, is that you don't just look at something that works for the people who are already in power, you look at how are we dismantling the power structures that are happening here. And I see there's a question in the chat. Can you talk about how you communicate the Kern Center technologies to the wider community? Is there a goal to educate architects and building developers? Yeah, so that's something as part of my internship, and Sarah and Claire do a lot. Communicating what's going on at the Kern, the main thing that we do is the Kern tours, and we just talk about all of these different things. But one thing which we're amping up and working on this summer is on our social media, like especially on our Instagram and stuff, sustainable swaps, like this idea of what are things that the average person around their home can do to be more sustainable. Like, not everyone isn't necessarily building a whole new building, and obviously not everyone necessarily even has the means for like solar panels, obviously, but what are ways despite that we can make our homes more energy efficient, more water efficient? All those kinds of things are like something as the Kern Center we always kind of look at and try to communicate. I don't know if that answers the question, or if anyone else wants to jump in on that question.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit too. I mean, a lot of, probably kind of half and half of what we do at the Kern Center, and it's not a good percentage, is sort of facing in towards Hampshire itself. So working with students who are looking at the building, obviously people coming and using the building. And then there's this whole other kind of outward facing piece where we're talking to architects, builders, mostly within New England, but all over the country and internationally, who are using the Kern Center as an example, either of this is how you build this kind of building, or even just as proof to other people that, hey, you know that whole green building thing I've been talking about? This is what it looks like, and it's possible, and believe me, and give me the chance to do it in my own practice. So we do things like professional development events, and we just had a webinar for Earth Day that talked about embodied carbon in buildings, and we had a bunch of builders and architects attend that. So that's kind of one of the intersection pieces that I really enjoy about working at the Kern Center, because we have this whole professional community that's coming in to use the building and learn from the building. And we also have this whole on-campus community that's coming in to learn from the building, and the amount of crossover that has. Like, Claire, I know on your Div 3, you were working with our civil engineer who designed the system and is still fine-tuning and operating the system along with us. And Claire's research, directly influenced how he advised us to operate the building, and vice versa. They were sharing data the whole time Claire was doing that project, and that's that kind of interaction. It wasn't like a school project where it's like, we're going to do this for fun. It was literally like, this is a new system. This is a kind of water treatment system that we haven't tried to run before. And Claire's data and our civil engineers data were, that's creating new science from that collaboration that I don't know would have happened anywhere else. I'm gonna check out some questions, but I also, if anyone else had thoughts about what's different about sustainability at Hampshire. Bernadette, do you have a question?
No, actually, I was going to answer it while you were reading the questions, or just talk about my own experience. Some of you have been on campus, and if you were with me during an info session, you would know I'm actually very passionate about the RW Kern Center. I really love it. I feel really, really lucky to be working there, even though I have nothing to do with sustainability at Hampshire at all, other than to help all of you who want to get into sustainability. But it is something I've always been really passionate about. And one thing I really like to say about the center is that the thing that I feel it demonstrates the most is the interconnectedness, the transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary way in which we look at all learning. There are computer science through hydrology and everything in between that has gone into this building. And professors from several different areas of the college work together to really get this building at its best. And I just feel like that's something that is such a Hampshire model. Computer sciences are doing one thing, the gray water system and the sciences are doing another thing. And then it's just a beautiful building. So the whole arts piece of it is just so present. So while Sarah goes into that other piece, I just sort of wanted to mention that.
So there is one quick question, which is very easy, so we can just answer it, which is there compost on campus? And Mayor jumped in to say, yes, they pick up compost from your mod, which is true. And there's also compost in most of the main like academic or student life buildings. So like the dining commons, obviously the Kern Center has compost. And so you can find places to compost around campus. But obviously most of the compost that we're having is in buildings that serve food. So near the cafe in the Kern Center, which has pretty good coffee and the best chocolate chip cookies. Good question, good to know. There was also a question of what are some sustainability or environmentally related careers that Hampshire students are looking at or pursuing. Actually, Ethan, what are you doing? Nope.
Right now, I'm at home and I've been applying to a lot of jobs that aren't necessarily related to sustainability or the environment. But what I'm interested in doing long term, so right now I've been applying to a lot of jobs in Boston, basically working as either like a research assistant at different hospitals, or some of the jobs involve like using aseptic technique and working with microbiological samples. And at least for right now, I think I'm going to try to do something like that in the next year or two. There was actually one company that I was applying to in Cambridge that was a startup that was making, they were making like, I think it was like sustainable coating for like vegetables and fruit so they don't deteriorate as quickly. And they were actually looking for a lab tech. And so I applied there, but we'll see how it goes. But
Good luck.
Yeah.
I can answer that too for some of the other recent grads. I mean, it's really, as you can imagine, it's quite varied. So that we've had students this year, someone who worked a lot on the building and architectural design and is now going to be working with a architectural design firm doing energy in Boston. And we have someone from last year, 2 years ago, also really interested in energy, who has been working on doing energy audits for buildings out in Colorado. We've had students that have taken a more conservation kind of approach and are doing things with park services out west, or in the in the Rockies. We have many, many students that go on to grad school in a whole variety of fields, looking at environmental science or looking at specific water or all different kinds of fields. We also have one of our chemists is really interested in green chemistry. So thinking about sustainability from a chemistry perspective and looking at, well, what are the ways that we can change chemistry to be more sustainable. So there's really a lot of different types of careers that people look at and apply these skills to.
Yeah, and I know there's a Hampshire alum that now goes to UMass studying engineering.
Oh, right.
Yeah, she's been doing some water research that directly affects some of the work that we're doing at our building. So that was a cool connection because we reached out to her and I didn't even know that she was an alum from Hampshire. Like, oh, you're studying engineering. So it was interesting.
We also have someone who is going to go into law, but he's actually interested in environmental law. So he was studying environmental issues here. And although his goal is to go into law school next, it's with the environmental slant for it.
Is that Sam? Yeah, okay. It's like, oh, you're describing someone I know. Other questions? Ooh, this is a good one. Are there efforts to eliminate single-use items on campus, and how does Hampshire manage waste in general? That's a good one, and that's something that people are working on from several different directions. We had a student 2 years ago, I guess, who really made that one of their major projects was improving the waste stream on campus. And that's actually why that student is the reason that there is composting in the mods at this point. That student and a few students that worked after she graduated instituted that mod-based composting system. Originally, it had just been in the main food service buildings. So that was nice to see that project come to fruition. I think generally there are efforts to eliminate single-use items on campus. We don't sell bottled water or bottled beverages, plastic bottled beverages on campus. There's plenty of water fountains and plenty of cups to put water in, or just put it directly in your mouth. Almost everyone just carries a water bottle around campus. It's just easier. And at least in the dining, so in that main dining hall, everything is just on regular reusable plates. The one place that we do have more single-use items is in like takeout food. So even at the cafe in the Kern Center and at the RCC, which has another food service area, there's more single-use items there. And part of what we're working on is how do we decrease that? We have people coming in, visiting the building who, may only be staying for a few hours. And we need to be really careful at the Kern Center about how much water we're using because we have a pretty tight water budget. So part of that is balancing, how much water would be used to wash reusable dishes versus what's the impact of the waste that is created by single-use items. So that's a balancing act. Right now, we just try to reduce the amount of single-use items we're using as much as possible. So, if I'm getting a cookie from the RW Kern Center, please don't put it in a bag. It's going directly in my mouth. I don't need a plate. So the cafe staff is really good about asking about that. Like, do you need a bag or are you taking this away? But that's definitely something that we're going to continue to work on, as I'm sure most campuses are. And I'm working on in my regular life too.
I think that's Sarah, you bring up a really interesting point about the Kern being a living building, and what that really means is that the people living in it have to interact with it, right? In most buildings, you get to go in and you don't see the systems and you don't interact with parts of the building. But in the Kern Center, one, the architecture is all exposed. You see the pipes, you see, all of either signs everywhere. But that also means that the people that are using things in the Kern, the people that work there, all interact in a way. So and Claire can probably give some more detail about how closely we've had to work with cafe staff about the gray water system. And the one story we like to tell is in the early, when the Kern Center first opened, we were having a lot of trouble with the gray water system, and it was getting clogged and it was really smelly, and everyone blamed the composting toilets, but that wasn't it. And what we came to realize was that in the cafe, at the end of every day, the folks working in the cafe would pour the cream and the dairy down the sink like you would at any cafe, the leftovers, all of the leftovers from the day, and it was clogging all the pipes. So if you think about in a gray water system in the basement, all of that leftover dairy went to the basement and sat in a tank with warm dishwater for the night. And so you can imagine what that does to pipes. And then it's starting to get pumped through the gray water system. So everything was closed. And that was a real problem. And so it took a little sleuthing to figure out where the problems was coming from. And we instituted, not me personally, but we worked with the cafe staff to change their behavior. So instead of the dairy going down the sink at the end of the day, it went to the compost and went to the pigs. And that solved the problem of the clogging of the pipes. But that required a behavior change of people living and working in the building. And so that's a really interesting way of kind of these feedbacks that we start to think about when we look at kind of the circular idea of our use and reuse and recycling. And so that's a good example from the Kern Center, but we're thinking about those kinds of things all over campus. And a lot of lessons we're learning in the Kern Center, we're then trying to apply in different buildings as well, like cleaning supplies, or other things that we've learned that we can or can't do in Kern, then enables us to do those same things in other parts. So.
I have a question. Sorry, my cat is jumping on everything right now. He's very excited. A question about work study or field study, the kind of things that people have gone out and worked on or worked on campus. Does anyone want to talk about kind of sustainability related jobs they've had while being at Hampshire? Actually, Claire, do you want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of different ways to get paid for interest in sustainability. Some of those are like more traditional jobs or internships where like I did and like Mara's doing, I'd have a certain amount of hours a week that I'm like working at the Kern Center for a salary. But there are other ways, other like sort of types of funding. So if you have a specific project you're interested in around sustainability, there are grants in some of the different schools at Hampshire and from the RW Kern Center that will fund projects related to sustainability. So I'm not sure exactly if that's what the student who was interested in compost was doing, but like, for example, if you had this goal of getting, compost picked up from on-campus residences and that was an already thing and you needed funding and you had a plan to do that, that's something that you could apply for money for. So like if you had your own idea, related to sustainability or other things, there are ways to get funding for that on campus. Other things that I did are summer internships. So the summer after my first year and the summer after my second year, I stayed on campus at Hampshire and had, through the School of Natural Science, paid internships to work with Chris on projects that were centered around the Kern Center. So I was, as has been mentioned, working with the wastewater treatment system at the Kern Center. And I was sort of early in the process of doing that and just sort of starting to research. But I was able to stay on campus for the summer and be paid to do that. And another way to be involved, not necessarily for money, but I guess depending on how you're doing it, is working as a teaching assistant. So that's more through the academic side. But you can work with professors and other students after you've taken a few classes in sustainability or, in any subject for that matter. But that's another way to be involved and something that I did. I'm trying to think of other jobs. The farm is a big one. A lot of students at Hampshire work on the farm. I had a roommate for 3 years who woke up at like 4 or 5 many mornings to go feed the animals on the farm. And so that is a pretty popular on-campus job that you can do. I'm trying to think of others.
Yeah,
Maybe
there's also all
other
the students
or-
that manage the mod compost. Those are all student workers that come and pick up students manage all of the mod facing compost stuff. So facilities does the stuff that's in the main dining hall, and the rest is run by students. And actually that program got started through New Leaf. So New Leaf is the kind of environmental sustainability student group on campus. And so the funding for that project actually got funded through New Leaf as a student group. They came to, I guess, FundCom. I wasn't a student, so I don't know what the funding place is called. FundCom, and got funding to do that specific project as a student group. And then it kind of, they went through facilities and got it more institutionalized as a campus-wide thing. And now it's continuing on past the particular students in that student group that started it, which is cool. Other job stuff?
Well, there's another question about, is it hard to get paid summer work that allows you to stay on campus, or are there a lot of opportunities like that? It definitely depends on what you're interested in doing. There are always like research opportunities. So if you wanted to apply for like funding for a project you're working on, I think you're more likely to be able to stay on campus. It's a little bit different year to year. I mean, obviously right now it's completely different. But I think my advice as somebody who was able to do it 3 summers in a row basically was, if you want to do it and you have a professor that's supporting you, and you're doing like a legitimate project or have like a legitimate job, like you're working in admissions, it's definitely a possibility to stay on campus and to be funded for your work.
Just checking out some other questions. Actually, five college theme generally. Any students want to talk about, so as part of being at Hampshire, as I'm sure you know, you can take classes at the other 4 of the total 5 colleges. So places like UMass Amherst, Smith College, Mount Holyoke, and Amherst College. And there's actually a 5-college environmental sustainability certificate. So if there's classes in specific subject matter that you want to take that are offered, only at Smith for a semester, or specific classes, if you're interested in doing engineering after Hampshire and you want to take some engineering specific classes at UMass, that's part of being in this 5-college community. There's the opportunity to do that. So I don't know if any of our students that are on want to share the kind of classes that they've taken at the other of the 5 college areas. Mary, you were just taking something this last semester, weren't you?
Yeah, I have taken a few classes at Amherst, Smith, and is that it? No, I took a class at Holyoke too. And the fun thing for me with taking classes on other campuses is always, like, very consistently, the professors are so impressed with Hampshire students. And like, I also do well in the classes, which is like, I mean, not that I didn't do well in high school, but it's just like shocking to like get an A from like a college like Amherst College. And I genuinely think it's because like Hampshire teaches you how to care about learning. Like it teaches you how to study. And it's the best part for me about like being able to take classes on the other campuses is like you get all of the resources of the other campuses there too. And like all of those professors want to work with you too. And, you know, you have labs and like more connections. Yeah, I did transfer from Edinburgh. That was just in the chat, which was, when did I go there? 2016 to 2017. That was my first year of college. So, and I can talk more. I don't know if there's any transfers, but if anyone wants like specific transfer questions, I'm happy to talk about that too.
Feel free to check them on the site.
Sarah, did you see the question about new curriculum?
Yeah, I was going to jump in and
No.
that I see. I think it was maybe Daisy who asked. Yeah, Daisy asked about the new curriculum for this fall. specifically the environmental geared collaboration learning. So yes, we're all really excited about this new curriculum and how it's going to really give students and faculty as well, and staff, a way to collaborate around questions, around these big questions that we're facing in the field of sustainability, environments, and really work together on them. So the seminars that you would all be a part of, you'd be in one seminar in the fall and one seminar in the spring, where you'd be with a cohort of students, as well as 3 to 4 faculty members and peer mentors and staff, academic affairs staff and student life staff, to really try to bring together all the different components across campus, right? So, you know, that instead of thinking of here's the academics and then student life is something very different, our goal in this new program is to really bring all of those things together. And I think it'll provide some opportunities. We were talking about composting in the mods and the kinds of things you do outside of the classroom. Well, this new model of collaborative learning will really enable us, I think, in an easier way to bring all of those things together. And so we can ask questions about and think about solutions to what we might be able to do as a campus across all of those fields. So I'm not sure, Daisy, does that answer your question, or is there more that you want me to? As I'm one of the faculty members that's been working on developing this new program with a number of other faculty and staff, and we're all very excited to have you all come and be a part of it.
I think it's interesting, actually, what I noticed even before coming to Hampshire and since working here. I feel like the way that problem solving and learning and collaboration has developed around this kind of topic node of the Kern Center is very much like the way that we're trying to do it across campus. You know, Chris, when you first did that class where you're taking a first year seminar and you're taking a hydrologist and a mathematician and a biologist and kind of just investigating this problem of, you know, how does this building system work? And then, you know, having to work, you know, the milk problem you were talking about, the cafe, you know, having to work with our facilities department, having to work with the farm, having to work with the student workers at the cafe. Like, that's a problem that nobody could have solved independently. You know, like no one microbiology professor was going to come in and be like, I have the solution, and everything would magically work. So that example of that's how people working together that way, that's how I'm hoping this will continue to develop.
Can you explain a little bit, like, if the collaboration will be like talking about environmental or sustainability goals on campus? Oh, I think I'm frozen. Or in more of like a global or nationwide sense, and if it's more like hypothetical or like current situations, and just kind of how that's all gonna work.
That's a great question. I think the answer is yes to all of those things. And so the faculty members, these are for the fall, these are all new courses that are being developed. So they haven't been taught many times before. There's not an established syllabus, but I think usually it's a combination of all those things. And I know specifically the environments and change, the innovations for change class. I know a little bit about that class because I've worked with those professors before, and I know that they really look at practical applications and how can we think about these things. So I think it really will be a mix of those, and what we're hoping in each of these is to develop opportunities for students to also do either as part of the class projects, or then could lead into independent projects as well. So I know in their, both Claire and Ethan had taken a similar seminar in their first semester, and then also developed independent projects out of that were supported by the faculty that they had worked with. And so I think you can get a real mix of looking at kind of these global level and local level, and then if there's a particular aspect of it that you're really interested in pursuing further, either individually or with a small cohort of students, you can get support to do that as well, that either builds out of a class or, yeah, so that's a great question.
Thank you.
All right, so we have just about 5 minutes left. Just taking a look if there were other pressing questions.
Can I at least bring up the one about housing in the summer? Unless, Chris, some of you may have a little more info, but from the admissions perspective, what we usually present to folks is that some students can stay on a campus if they petition and they have a reason, blah, blah, blah. There are ways for staying on campus in the summer. However, generally my understanding is if you are working at Hampshire doing research or doing something, that is generally the easier time to get on-campus housing. On the other hand, this valley is filled with 5 colleges. Finding a sublet is so incredibly easy. It's almost ridiculous. I can tell you of 5 I know for this summer alone when nobody is actually moving and there's still summer sublets available. So it really is not a problem finding summer housing here. That is very, very easy for sure. Did that answer enough for you?
So there is one question about if someone can do a Hampshire job on top of another internship or research as well. I don't know the exact, Claire, do you know the answer to that?
I think can someone do a Hampshire job on top of another? Are you saying, so now summer? I mean, I think that the quick answer is yes. You can definitely have multiple jobs or an internship and a job during the summer, yeah. So like, for example, one summer I had a 10-week like research internship and I was also like working like hourly as a teaching assistant for Chris. So I had like the internship like research piece that I was being funded for and that like covered my housing, and that's the reason I was allowed to stay on campus. But I also had like a more traditional like hourly job that I was putting like a time card in for and stuff like that. For students on campus during the summer and during the year, there's like a limit to the number of hours you can work. I think it's 29 hours per week for like insurance reasons, which you'd find anywhere.
20.
20
yeah. During the semester, yep.
20 during the semester, yeah. So you can't work like on campus for campus funding more hours than that per week, but yeah, you can definitely be doing multiple things. You don't have to choose one.
Right, I mean, and especially if you were gonna do an internship off campus or somewhere else or at a nearby business, but you also were going to work at the Kern Cafe. I mean, that's something that you could totally do. Chris, this might be a question for you or Claire. Question about Hampshire students working on a project during the summer for credit and the possibility of graduating early.
So both of those things, so students do work on, lots of students work on projects in the summer, and anything that, the nice thing about Hampshire is all of the things that you do count as part of your learning, right? So the only learning that you're doing is not while you're sitting in classrooms. So all of the internships, all the projects, all the summer work, you know, that we really think of learning as what you do as a person moving through this world in so many different forms. And so that's all part of your education. Kind of the more direct question about graduating early, there is that some students, I'd say not that many, but there are some students who are able to do an accelerated Division II program. And so finishing Division II in 3 semesters instead of 4. And for some of those students, they've often taken extra classes during the school year or done summer projects or multiple summer projects to kind of build their Division II portfolio. And that's something that you would work on with your Division II committee. So depending on the field that you're studying and the questions you're trying to answer and address, you would work with your committee to figure out what classes, what projects, what independent studies, all of those things would work for you. But for some students, they're able to put that whole program into 3 semesters instead of 4, and then graduate a semester early. So that is a possibility.
Well, it is 8.
I'm just going to stay on. For anybody who has any more questions, there are 1 or 2 questions I do want to address, but I know we have some student interns that are joining us that, and others who may have a time frame that they're looking to move on. So I'm going to say, before I finish the last of this, thank you to all of you. It will be archived, so you can go back and listen. Sarah, if you want to say more, but I'm going to stay on and address 1 or 2 more things if anybody wants to stay on.
Yep. And I will also say that if anybody has questions about the Kern Center specifically, that kern@hampshire.edu email address that went out along with this invitation, that goes to both Claire and me, and actually Mare as well, because Mare is one of our interns. And I'm happy to answer anything. There is a specific question about COVID-19 and the Kern Center, and I'm going to send you a paragraph. So I'm going to take that. I'll just email you specifically.
Great.
And I just want to mention, I just wanted to mention quickly too, if anybody has questions about the academic program or classes or anything that I might be able to help answer, I'm happy to email with you or set up a Zoom call. And you can find me in the directory, or I'm sure Bernadette has my contact information that she could pass along, but I'm happy to have any follow-up conversations.
Excellent. Cassidy, I do want to address the merchandise. To be perfectly honest, marketing really chooses most of that. They definitely have as much of an environmental slant as they can. Admittedly, cost is often a thing. So the reality is we do what we can, but marketing actually has the final say on that one. And unless we give them a budget that they can up it, they're probably going to make their own decision, if that makes sense. But we do.
That's a great question, though.
It is, and
that's something that
they tried to be.
That's something that we think about a lot with the Kern Center, because as much as admission is putting out things, if we have an event as the RW Kern Center, I'm not about to go and give everyone, a single-use plastic item that they will never use again. So a lot of what we think about is, okay, how can we get the word out about what we're doing, and having a physical, tangible object can be part of that, but how do we make sure it's useful? So, one of the things that we got this year are, insulated coffee mugs that are, they're RW Kern Center branded, but you can use them anywhere on campus. If you use a reusable container on campus, you get 25 cents off your coffee, which is great. And it means if I send that out to somebody, or if someone who comes to visit the building has that, at least I know that that's something useful that both serves my marketing purpose and, helps them make more sustainable choices in their life. So that's like the lens that I try to bring. And we sit near admissions, so we try to just kind of nudge too.
Exactly. And Mara, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I definitely agree. There is an element of marketing that is about spending money, and I have certainly no control over it. But also, it's a hard thing as a college to figure out how to help students remember about us, be interested, know that we're thinking about you, we want to offer you things, while still being both fiscally responsive, environmentally responsible. There's a lot of elements, and we actually do talk about it a lot. And our marketing through admissions is actually in the RW Kern Center as well, so I know it's on their mind. And maybe you will come and work in marketing and help us. And I'm not being funny about that. I'm being really serious. We really, really take student input clearly and want it, and we want you to bring these ideas to us. So come and help us find a solution. That would be absolutely the best thing that I could hope for. So that would be great.
Hampshire students are awesome at pointing out something that you have taken for granted and saying, why are you doing that? What is this for? And then you can start the conversation about, oh yeah, you're right. I don't know, but just we've always done it that way. Isn't that a good enough reason? And the answer is usually no.
Exactly. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to stay on. I have to say it's been great to see a lot of your smiles tonight. Thank you for your input. We're really appreciating all of these great comments and questions, and we look forward to you joining us in the fall.
Awesome.
I will send out an email tomorrow morning, by the way, as well, with contact info and other